When thinking about a Dark Souls remake, perhaps the most important decision we have to make is, do we modernize the gameplay or do we keep it in line with the original and simply improve upon what was already there? Option A, we keep the original gameplay, but with Demon's Souls remake tier graphics, hopefully keeping the artistic fidelity of DS1, and then we could add all the cool things that we ever wanted from the game, say bug fixes, improved PvP without all the backstab and dark beat BS, quality of life features like improved UIs, weapons and enemy balancing, being able to teleport to every bonfire, and blah blah blah. In option B, we make DS1 play like Elden Ring, with faster combat, posture breaks, weapon arts, and enhanced enemy movesets. Which one would you prefer? After those DS1 Glaze videos I just made, you probably expect me to pick option A, right? But actually, I don't. I don't want that because From Software has changed. It's not the company it used to be, and Miyazaki as a human being is different. Think about it. Dark Souls came out in 2011. After so long as a creative, you're going to be on an entirely different mindset from what you used to be so long ago. And therefore, I do not think From Software can just go back and recreate the feeling of Dark Souls 1 with good fidelity to the original throughout its later areas as it would have been had they had more time to actually finish it all those years ago. And I don't think From Software even wants to, because a lot of what makes these old games good was the restrictions that old hardware put on the developers. That's what gives them their iconic art style. So give them a PS5 and they will probably add lots of map details with high render distance and remove the blur that gave this game its unique visual appeal. It's basically impossible to grab a modern day company that wants to make a game that sells money and then tell them to expand on DS1 while keeping with the original vision. Dark Souls is Dark Souls. With its original gameplay and graphics, we already have it. It exists, and it's already good. Regardless of what happens later, we can always be happy that this thing that we have will always be immortalized across time. So, how about we go balls to the wall and give Artorias and Gwyn bigger and stronger movesets? Ones that would show how strong these characters actually are in the lore. Yes, Gwyn is a husk of his former self, and his fight should reflect that, but Gwyn's soul is still a mighty thing indeed, according to the game. And if nothing else, do it for the fan service. But do it properly. I don't want these bosses that I grew to love to suddenly be given Elden Ring tier movesets with their 17 hit combos and shockwave AoEs. I want them to have respectable yet fair movesets like Soul of Cinder or Nameless King. Because the lore of Dark Souls 1 always felt grander than the actual game ended up being, in terms of map and enemy design. Like, Lord Nito, First of the Dead, one of the gods of this world, is just sleeping inside a hole with a bunch of skeletons. Okay? So how about we use this opportunity of this remake to show this world in its full glory? If they actually do this properly, and if we imagine that this would be a comparatively small game, that it would be really focused and have a lot of time to refine a lot of the systems, imagine the PvP scene for this game. Elden Ring can never have good PvP because there's a trillion weapons and spells in the game, and that game is primarily about big flashy attacks, so an Elden Ring doesn't have covenants or even real invasions. So think about it. This could very well be the ultimate Dark Souls PvP experience. It could be the world of Dark Souls, but expanded and perfected. The perfect game with insane gameplay, replayability, story, and player interaction to make sure this thing lasts. Now, if you're talking real fanfiction, let's open one of these portals in time, like the one that took us to Wulasil in the DLC, and let the player go back and forth into the future, letting us fight bosses all across the trilogy. Like a boss rush game mode where you run through bosses like in Sekiro. The more I think about it, the more this game turns into the ultimate Dark Souls game. But those are my thoughts on that. Personally, that's the gameplay and combat that I want, and even though it's a shame that we could never get a finalized version of the original DS1, I feel like that should have been the job of the remaster, and if we didn't get it then, I think that dream's over. But moving on, what we can all agree on is that we want an improvement to Anor Londo and all the later areas of the game. Those being the Duke's Archives, Nito's Domain, New Londo, and most importantly, Lost Izalith. For Anor Londo, you can make the excuse that it's meant to be a dead city of the gods, so it's meant to be really big and really empty. So that can be somewhat excusable, but I still think that Anor Londo needs tweaks, like the fact that getting from place to place takes so long, making dying in this area extremely boring. Maybe we could add a little side area to Anor Londo that will let us explore some of the city itself. Like, you can just get inside some of the people's houses in Leyndell. New Londo, in my opinion, is one of the better later areas in terms of gameplay, but it's still kind of eh. I don't know, I never have an amazing time in New Londo. Dark Wraiths are fun to fight, but the ghosts can be kind of annoying, so maybe we could go with the route of making this area into more of a horror game. Canonically, this is the weaker of the 4 areas, so it'd be interesting to see if New Londo was less about combat encounters and more about making your way through a creepy dead city. You know, just make it special. For the Duke's Archives and Nito's Domain, all they need to do is add more enemy variety, a bigger map layout, and reduce the attack rating for some of the enemies. Personally, I'm fine with how puzzly these areas can be to traverse. Some people may not like that, but I think that's kind of the point. So if they could just expand on that and make that actually fun to do, that'd be great. And then for Lost Izalith, I'm gonna be honest, just delete it from the game. This area never existed. On that note, maybe I could do a ranking of the Dark Souls areas in a later video if you guys want. After all of this are just thoughts in my head that after a long time I'm finally turning into videos. So, is there something that you would like to see in a Dark Souls remake? Maybe an expanded questline for some of the NPCs like Black Iron Tarkus? Maybe some kind of boss gauntlet like in Hollow Knight where you'd fight the 4 Knights of Gwyn? Or Artorias and Sith in their prime? Actually, that gives me an idea. Talking about Hollow Knight, that game has a DLC where you can fight bosses in the Pantheon, where they're all put at their full power as they would be in the lore. You know where I'm going with this. What if we get to fight a full power Prime Gwyn? Yo, actually, let me expand on this. Remember the boss gauntlet across time that I was talking about earlier? What if you begin by fighting the weaker bosses like Gundyr, Taurus Demon, Last Giant, and then you move on to the strong bosses like Nameless King, Artorias, Gale, and then the final fight is just Prime Gwyn at full power. The Abyss from Hollow Knight could be the Forgotten Pygmy from DS1. Now that I'm thinking about it, these games have a lot of similarities. Anyway, thanks to this, all the YouTubers that make the boss versus boss content, they'd be making videos about Prime Gwyn versus Elden Beast, full power consumed Artorias versus 15 Millennials. I'm just saying, if FromSoft wants to make trillions of dollars, just remake Dark Souls, add all the cool expanded content, cross-reference across other games, and then add some replayable PvP and PvE content, and that's it, you're golden. If done properly, this could be easily my favorite game of all time, and maybe the best game of all time, but that's just a fan speaking. Drop your ideas in comments, and bye.